I arrived late with my 5-year-old. Mom sneered, "This was a perfect night until you brought her. Get out." My dad laughed. I left in tears. The next morning, they called screaming. They were banned for life from the restaurant I secretly bought 3 years ago. The reservation was set for 7 o'clock at the Gilded Fork. Even the name sounded intimidating, didn't it? It sounded like the kind of place where you needed a membership just to breathe the air inside. But for my family, that was the point. If it wasn't exclusive, if it wasn't dripping in gold and velvet, they weren't interested. I stood in front of the mirror in our small, 2-bedroom apartment, trying to tame my daughter's hair. Daisy is 5 years old, and she has this beautiful, wild curly hair that refuses to follow instructions. Just like her mother, I suppose. "Hold still, sweetie," I whispered, my fingers working quickly to weave a small blue ribbon into her braid. It was the same blue as her dress. I had found the dress at a thrift store 3 towns over, but you would never know it. It was vintage, with hand-stitched lace on the collar. On anyone else, it would look chic. On Daisy, it looked like royalty. But I knew my mother, Cynthia, wouldn't see the lace or the ribbon. She would only see that it didn't have a designer tag from Paris or Milan. Daisy turned around, her big brown eyes looking up at me with that mixture of hope and anxiety that no 5-year-old should ever have to feel. "Mommy," she asked, her voice quiet. "Do you think Grandma will like my drawing this time?" My heart cracked a little. Just a hairline fracture, one of a million I had accumulated over the years. I looked at the piece of paper she was clutching. It was a drawing of a garden, with a big yellow sun and stick figures holding hands. She had spent 2 hours on it. "Of course she will, baby," I lied. I hated lying to her. But what was I supposed to say? That Grandma Cynthia didn't have the capacity to love anything that didn't improve her social standing? That to her, a grandchild was only useful if they were a prodigy or a model? I smoothed down the front of my own dress. It was black, simple, and old. I had worn it to the last 3 family gatherings. I knew my sister, Kylie, would make a comment about it. She would probably ask if I was saving up for a new wardrobe or if I was just making a statement about poverty chic. "You look beautiful," Daisy said, sensing my hesitation. "You look like a princess who is hiding." I smiled and kissed her forehead. A princess hiding. She was more right than she knew. "Okay, let's go," I said, grabbing my keys. "We don't want to be late. You know how Grandpa gets when we're late." We walked out to the parking lot. The sun was starting to set, casting long shadows across the pavement. My car sat there, a reliable, dented silver Toyota that had seen better days. It had over 150,000 miles on it. The air conditioning only worked on the highest setting, which sounded like a jet engine taking off, and there was a permanent stain on the back seat from a juice box incident 3 years ago. To my family, this car was proof of my failure. To me, it was camouflage. I buckled Daisy into her booster seat. She clutched her drawing to her chest like a shield. As I turned the key in the ignition and the engine sputtered to life, I took a deep breath. Just get through tonight, Ophelia, I told myself. Just survive the appetizers, endure the main course, and escape before dessert. Do it for Daisy. She deserves to know her family, even if they don't deserve her. I pulled out onto the main road, heading toward the wealthy district downtown. I didn't know it yet, but this wasn't just going to be another dinner. This was going to be the last time I ever let them make us feel small. The drive to the Gilded Fork took about 45 minutes. Traffic was heavy, a river of red taillights stretching out toward the city skyline. Daisy fell asleep in the back seat about 10 minutes in, her head lolling to the side, that drawing still crinkled in her hand. I used the quiet time to mentally prepare myself. I call it putting on my armor. You see, in the Peterson family, everyone has a role. My father, Winston, is the patriarch. He is a high-powered corporate lawyer who believes that emotions are a weakness and that every interaction is a negotiation he needs to win. My mother, Cynthia, is the matriarch. She is the curator of the family image. To her, we aren't people, we are accessories. If we look good, she wears us proudly. If we don't, she shoves us in the back of the closet. Then there are my siblings. Garrett is the golden child. He works at Dad's firm, drives a Porsche, and cheats on his wife, Brittany, with his secretary. But because he brings in money and looks good in a suit, he can do no wrong. And Kylie, my younger sister. She is the baby. She's 26, engaged to a hedge fund manager, and has never worked a real day in her life. Her job is being pretty and judging people. And me? I'm Ophelia. The black sheep. The cautionary tale. In their version of the story, I am the one who ruined my potential. I was the smart one, the one with the grades, but then I made the mistake of marrying Sebastian. Sebastian was handsome, charming, and came from a family with money that made the Petersons look middle class. My parents were thrilled. They thought they had finally brokered the merger of the century. But they didn't know what Sebastian was really like behind closed doors. They didn't know about the coldness, the controlling behavior, the nights he didn't come home. When I filed for divorce 3 years ago, my parents were horrified. Not because I was unhappy, but because I was walking away from the status. They assumed I was dumped. They assumed I had been kicked out with nothing because I was difficult or unlovable. They assumed I was scraping by on a tiny alimony check, working freelance jobs just to keep the lights on. Why don't you get a real job, Ophelia? My dad would ask at every dinner. Why do you live in that awful apartment complex? My mom would sneer. It smells like boiled cabbage in the hallway. They looked at me and saw a failure. A single mom driving a beat-up Toyota, struggling to raise a daughter without a father. They treated me with a mix of pity and disgust. I looked in the rearview mirror at Daisy sleeping. They hated her, too, in a way. Not openly, of course. That would be uncouth. But they treated her like a nuisance. She was the granddaughter without a pedigree. The product of a failed marriage. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. The irony of it all was almost funny. If they actually bothered to ask me about my life, instead of just lecturing me, they might realize that things weren't what they seemed. They thought I was poor. They thought I was trapped. They had no idea that the failure of the family was actually the only one who was truly free. They had no idea about the meeting I had sat through 3 years ago, in a boardroom that smelled of mahogany and fear, where my life changed forever. I remember the day I signed the papers vividly. It was raining, a gray, miserable Tuesday in November. I was sitting in a conference room on the 45th floor of a skyscraper in Manhattan. The table was so long you could have landed a small plane on it. On one side sat Sebastian's family lawyers. 5 of them. They looked like sharks in $3,000 suits. On the other side sat me, alone, wearing a cardigan I had bought at Target. Sebastian wasn't there. He was supposedly on a wellness retreat in Bali, but we all knew he was actually in rehab again to avoid a scandal right before his family's company launched their initial public offering. That was the leverage. The head lawyer, a man with gray hair and eyes like ice, slid a folder across the table toward me. "Mrs. Peterson," he said. His voice was smooth, devoid of any warmth. "We are prepared to offer a one-time settlement to finalize the dissolution of the marriage immediately. This is a take-it-or-leave-it offer. The family values their privacy above all else. We require a complete non-disclosure agreement. You will never speak of Sebastian's indiscretions. You will never give interviews. You will never write a book. You will fade away." I opened the folder. I expected to see a reasonable number. Maybe enough to buy a small house and pay for Daisy's college. I was ready to fight for $500,000. My eyes scanned the document. I stopped at the figure on the second page. I blinked, sure that I was misreading it. I counted the zeros. $30 million. 30 million. I looked up at the lawyer. He didn't blink. To them, this was hush money. It was the price of ensuring their stock price didn't tank because the heir to the empire was a mess. To me, it was freedom. It was a life raft the size of a yacht. I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. I signed my name, Ophelia Peterson, in blue ink. With that signature, I became a multimillionaire instantly. I walked out of that building into the rain, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel heavy. I felt light. I wanted to call my mom immediately. I wanted to scream, "Look. I made it. I'm safe. We're set for life." I actually dialed her number. It rang twice. "Hello?" She answered, sounding annoyed. "Ophelia, make it quick, I'm getting a facial." The words died in my throat. I remembered the last time I asked her for help, when my car broke down and I needed $200 for a tow truck. She had lectured me for 20 minutes about financial responsibility before hanging up. If I told them about the money, everything would change. But not in a good way. They wouldn't love me more. They would just love the money. Winston would try to manage my portfolio. Garrett would ask for investments in his terrible business ideas. Cynthia would start planning vacations for us to take her on. They would drain me dry, just like they drained my confidence growing up. So, I hung up. I never told them. I deposited the check into a diversified trust fund I set up under a generic name, OD Holdings. Ophelia and Daisy. I hired a financial advisor, a tax attorney, and a wealth manager. I learned about stocks, bonds, and commercial real estate. I kept my job as a freelance graphic designer because I enjoyed it, and it gave me a cover story. I kept the apartment. I kept the Toyota. It became a test. A secret test that I ran every single time I saw them. I wanted to know if my family could love me when they thought I had nothing. I wanted to know if they could treat Daisy with kindness just because she was their blood, not because she was an heir to a fortune. 3 years later, the answer was becoming painfully clear. They failed the test every single time. But tonight? Tonight was going to be different. Because tonight, we were going to a place that was very special to me. As we exited the highway and entered the city center, the scenery changed. The buildings got taller, the streetlights got brighter, and the cars surrounding us shifted from Fords and Hondas to Bentleys and Maseratis. My dad, Winston, loved this part of town. He loved the exclusivity of it. He loved walking into a place and knowing that 99% of the population couldn't afford a glass of water there. We were heading to the Gilded Fork. It was the crown jewel of the city's dining scene. It occupied the entire ground floor of a historic building that had been renovated 2 years ago. What my father didn't know, what none of them knew, was who actually signed the checks for that renovation. About 18 months ago, my wealth manager presented me with an opportunity. A commercial real estate portfolio was coming up for sale quietly. It included 3 office buildings and a historic structure on Fifth Avenue. I bought the whole package for $12 million. Technically, legally, and in every way that mattered, I was the landlord. I remember meeting the restaurant manager, Mr. Rossi, shortly after the purchase. He was a terrifyingly efficient Italian man who wore impeccable suits. When I walked into his office wearing jeans and a t-shirt, he looked confused. When I showed him the ownership papers, he turned pale. "Mrs. Peterson," he had stammered. "I apologize. We can prepare the owner's suite for you immediately." "No," I had told him, sitting down in one of his leather chairs. "That's actually the opposite of what I want. Listen to me closely, Mr. Rossi. No one knows I own this building. Not the press, not the staff, and definitely not my family." He nodded slowly. "Discretion. I understand. If I ever come in here to eat, you treat me like a normal customer. In fact, I want to see how your staff treats normal customers. If I see arrogance, if I see rudeness, we're going to have a problem. Do you understand?" "I understand perfectly, ma'am." Since then, the Gilded Fork had become my favorite secret spot. I came here with Daisy on quiet Tuesday afternoons when the place was empty. The staff knew us now. They adored Daisy. The chef would make her special mac and cheese that wasn't on the menu, served on fine china. To them, I was the kind, eccentric owner who tipped distinctively well. But tonight, I wasn't the owner. Tonight, I was just Ophelia, the disappointment. I turned the corner and saw the restaurant's valet stand. It was swarming with expensive cars. I saw my dad's black Mercedes S-Class parked right in front, gleaming under the lights. My brother's Porsche was right behind it. I felt a knot of anxiety in my stomach. It wasn't fear of them anymore, it was the anticipation of the collision. It was the feeling of knowing two worlds were about to crash into each other. Daisy woke up as I slowed the car down. "Are we here, Mommy?" She yawned, rubbing her eyes. "Yes, baby. We're here. Remember what we practiced?" Daisy nodded seriously. Napkin on the lap. Elbows off the table. Say please and thank you. That's my girl. I pulled the battered Toyota up to the valet stand, right behind a bright red Ferrari. The contrast was almost comical. The valet, a young man named Kevin whom I had hired myself 6 months ago, looked at the car. He recognized it immediately. He gave me a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. "Good evening, ma'am," Kevin said, opening my door with the same reverence he had shown the Ferrari driver. "Thank you, Kevin," I said softly, slipping a $20 bill into his hand. "Keep it close?" "Of course," he whispered. I took Daisy's hand. Her palm was warm and small in mine. We walked toward the massive oak doors of the restaurant. Through the glass, I could see the chandeliers sparkling like diamonds. I could see the waiters moving like dancers. And way in the back, in the private glass-walled VIP room, I could see my family. They were already drinking wine. They were already laughing. They looked like a picture-perfect family advertisement. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and pushed open the door. The moment we stepped inside, the noise of the city vanished, replaced by the soft hum of jazz and the clinking of crystal. The gilded fork smelled of truffle oil, expensive perfume, and old money. The hostess, a lovely woman named Sarah, smiled genuinely when she saw us. She opened her mouth to say, "Good evening, Mrs. Peterson," but I caught her eye and gave a tiny shake of my head. She paused, corrected herself seamlessly, and said, "Good evening. Your party is waiting in the Onyx room." "Thank you," I said, keeping my voice low. I guided Daisy through the main dining room. I could feel eyes on us. It wasn't paranoia. We stuck out. In a sea of black ties and evening gowns, Daisy's vintage floral dress and my simple black attire looked out of place. But it wasn't the stranger's eyes that burned, it was the gaze waiting for us in the VIP room. The Onyx room was separated from the main floor by soundproof glass. It was designed for privacy and exclusivity. As we approached the glass door, I saw my mother first. Cynthia was holding a glass of white wine, her other hand gesturing wildly as she told a story. She looked impeccable, as always. Cashmere, diamonds, Botox. She turned her head and saw us through the glass. Her smile didn't just fade, it dropped off a cliff. She nudged my father. Winston looked up from his menu. He checked his watch immediately. We were 3 minutes late. I opened the door and stepped in. The air in the room felt 10 degrees colder than the main restaurant. "Hello, everyone," I said, trying to keep my voice cheerful for Daisy's sake. Silence. My brother, Garrett, leaned back in his chair and smirked. He looked at me, then looked past me through the glass at the parking lot. "Did you valet that thing?" Garrett asked, loud enough for the waiters to hear. "Or did they make you park it down the block so it wouldn't scare the other cars?" His wife, Brittany, giggled behind her hand. "Hello to you too, Garrett," I said, ignoring the jab. "Oh, Ophelia," my mother sighed. She didn't say hello. She didn't stand up to hug us. She just sighed, a long, weary sound like I was a heavy burden she had to carry. I didn't realize you were bringing her. She gestured vaguely at Daisy as if my daughter were a piece of carry-on luggage I had forgotten to check. Daisy stepped forward, tightening her grip on my hand. "Hi, Grandma," she piped up. I wore my blue dress. Cynthia looked at the dress. Her eyes scanned the stitching, the fabric, the ribbon. It took her less than a second to appraise its monetary value and find it lacking. "It's very colorful," Cynthia said, her lip curling slightly. "Though I thought I told you this was a business casual dinner, Ophelia. Not a daycare playdate. That fabric looks like it came from a curtain." "It's vintage, Mom," I said, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. "It's used," she corrected. "There's a difference." "Sit down," Winston barked from the head of the table. "You're letting the cold air in. You're late, and we've already ordered appetizers. Try to catch up without making a scene." I looked around the table. There were 6 chairs. 5 were occupied. There was one empty chair next to the door, the worst seat in the room. And there was no high chair. No booster seat. Nothing for Daisy. I pulled out the heavy oak chair. Daisy tried to climb up, but she was too small. She struggled, her little legs kicking. No one moved to help. Garrett watched her struggle and took a sip of his bourbon. "Here, baby," I whispered, lifting her up onto the chair. She sat there, her chin barely clearing the edge of the table. She looked so small against the massive furniture. "Where is she supposed to sit?" I asked, looking at my dad. "She's sitting, isn't she?" Winston grunted. "We didn't request a high chair. It ruins the aesthetic of the room. Just tell her to sit still and be quiet. I have important news to discuss, and I don't want any interruptions." Daisy looked at me, confusion clouding her face. She opened her mouth to ask why Grandpa was angry, but I squeezed her hand under the table. Just be brave, I thought. Just an hour. We just have to last an hour. The waiter arrived with the appetizers, a tower of seafood that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. He placed it in the center of the table, closer to Garrett and Kylie. Daisy's eyes widened. She reached out a hand toward a shrimp. "Ah!" Cynthia snapped, slapping the table hard. Her hand didn't hit Daisy, but the sound was like a gunshot. Daisy recoiled, pulling her hand back to her chest. "Don't touch," Cynthia hissed. "This is for adults. You'll make a mess." "Ophelia, didn't you feed her before you came? God knows she doesn't have the palate for oysters, Rockefeller." "I fed her, Mom," I said, my voice tight. "She's just curious." "Curiosity killed the cat, and it stains tablecloths," Cynthia said, turning back to her wine. The meal progressed in agonizing slow motion. I ordered a small salad. I ordered Daisy a side of mashed potatoes, asking the waiter to bring it in a bowl she couldn't break. The conversation at the table flowed around us like we were rocks in a stream. They talked about people I didn't know. They talked about vacations I wasn't invited to. "So," Winston announced, tapping his fork against his glass. "The firm landed the McAllister account." Garrett cheered. "That's huge, Dad. That's a 7-figure retainer." Kylie clapped her hands, her diamond engagement ring catching the light. "Does this mean we're going to Aspen this year for Christmas?" "First class, baby," Winston grinned. He looked around the table, beaming. It was the face of a man who measured his worth in billable hours. His eyes slid over me and Daisy without pausing. I cut Daisy's potatoes into tiny bites. She ate silently, keeping her head down. She had brought her drawing with her, placing it carefully on her lap under the napkin. I knew she was waiting for a break in the conversation to show it. She had practiced what she was going to say. "Grandma, this is your garden." I wanted to tell her not to bother. I wanted to tell her to keep it hidden. But how do you crush a child's hope without being the villain yourself? Kylie turned to me, a fake smile plastered on her face. So, Ophelia. Still doing those little computer drawings? I'm a graphic designer, Kylie. And yes. Business is good. Business, Garrett scoffed. You make logos for dog walkers. Let's not call it business. It's a hobby that pays for groceries. Barely. It pays my rent, I said, keeping my tone even. And what a rent it must be, Cynthia laughed. Living in that box. Honestly, Ophelia, it's embarrassing. When people ask where my eldest daughter lives, I have to change the subject. I tell them you're finding yourself. It sounds better than finding the bottom of the barrel. Daisy looked up. Why is Grandma laughing? Is she telling a joke? No, baby, I whispered. Grandma isn't telling a joke. Just then, the waiter returned to clear the appetizer plates. He leaned in to take my plate, and smiled at Daisy. Is everything good, little miss? He asked kindly. Daisy beamed. It's yummy. Thank you. She's so polite, the waiter said to the table. My mother actually rolled her eyes. She's loud, Cynthia corrected him. We prefer a quieter service. The waiter's smile faltered. He nodded stiffly and retreated. I felt a surge of rage so hot it almost made me dizzy. Insulting me was one thing. Insulting my daughter for being polite? That was a new low. I checked the time. 7:30. We had been here for 20 minutes. It felt like 20 years. The main courses arrived. Steaks for the men, lobster for the women. I had ordered the cheapest pasta dish on the menu. Daisy was starting to get restless. 5-year-olds aren't built to sit still in high-backed leather chairs for an hour while adults talk about capital gains taxes. Mommy, she whispered. Can I show her now? I looked at Cynthia. She was dissecting her lobster with surgical precision, complaining to Kylie that the butter wasn't clarified enough. She seemed to be in a slightly better mood after her second glass of wine. Maybe wait a little bit, I said. But I'm tired, Daisy whined softly. I want to show her and go home. My heart broke. She didn't want to be here either. She just wanted the approval she thought she needed. Okay, I said. Be careful. Daisy sat up straighter. She pulled the drawing out from under her napkin. It was slightly wrinkled now, but the yellow sun was still bright. Grandma? She said. Her voice was small, barely audible over the clinking of silverware. Cynthia didn't hear her. Or she pretended not to. She was busy talking about a neighbor's divorce. Grandma? Daisy said louder. Cynthia stopped chewing. She turned her head slowly, looking at Daisy with an expression of mild irritation. What? What is it? I made this for you, Daisy said. She held out the paper. She had to lean forward to reach across the corner of the table toward Cynthia. In her eagerness, Daisy's elbow bumped her own water glass. It wasn't a wine glass. It wasn't a heavy crystal goblet. It was a small, stemless water tumbler. The glass tipped over. It happened in slow motion. The water spilled across the white tablecloth. It flowed like a river, soaking the edge of the paper drawing and continuing its path toward the edge of the table. A small splash, maybe a teaspoon of water, landed on the strap of Cynthia's handbag, which was sitting on the floor next to her chair. Gasp. The sound in the room died instantly. Daisy froze. Her hands were still holding the drawing, which was now soggy on one corner. Her eyes went wide. Uh-oh, she whispered. Cynthia looked at the water spreading on the cloth. She looked at her bag. She looked at Daisy. Her face turned a color I had never seen before. It wasn't red, it was a pale, icy white. She stood up so abruptly her chair scraped loudly against the floor. My bag! She shrieked. It was a Birkin. I knew it was a Birkin because she had told us the price tag 3 times since we sat down. Mom, it's just water, I said, reaching for a napkin to blot the spill. It'll dry. It didn't even hit the leather, just the strap. Don't you touch it. Cynthia yelled, slapping my hand away. You'll rub it in. She grabbed her bag, inspecting it like it was a wounded soldier. There was a tiny, dark spot on the strap where the water had hit. A spot the size of a dime. Daisy started to tremble. Her lower lip wobbled. I'm sorry, Grandma, she squeaked. It was an accident. Accident? Cynthia turned her gaze on Daisy. It was a gaze filled with pure, unadulterated venom. You clumsy little. Cynthia, Winston warned, looking at the door to see if the waiters were watching. Keep it down. I will not keep it down. Cynthia yelled. She threw her napkin onto the table right on top of Daisy's drawing, covering the yellow sun with a linen shroud. I told you, Ophelia. I told you not to bring her. The air in the room felt electrified, heavy with the storm that was breaking. You ruined the vibe. Cynthia sneered, her voice dripping with disgust. Her face was twisted, ugly despite the expensive makeup. We were having a perfect evening. We were celebrating your father's success. And you had to bring her. Look at this mess. She gestured to the wet tablecloth as if it were a crime scene. Mom, stop, I said, my voice shaking. She's 5. It's water. Stop acting like she threw acid at you. Don't you dare talk to your mother like that, Winston barked. He pointed a steak knife at me. You are the one who failed to control your child. You brought an unruly brat into a fine dining establishment. What did you expect? I looked at my brother. Garrett was laughing. He was actually chuckling, shaking his head as he texted someone on his phone. Probably telling his mistress about the drama. Get that brat out of here, Cynthia hissed. She sat back down, turning her shoulder to us. Take her to the car. Or better yet, take her home. I can't eat with her staring at me and throwing things. Daisy let out a sob. It was a high, thin sound that pierced right through my chest. Mommy, she cried, hiding her face in my arm. Am I bad? Grandma hates me. That was it. That was the moment the bridge burned. I had spent 31 years trying to please these people. I had spent 31 years apologizing for existing, for taking up space, for not being rich enough or smart enough or cold enough. I had taken their insults. I had taken their neglect. But I would be damned if I let them do it to Daisy. Something inside me shifted. It wasn't a snap, it was a locking into place. The fear evaporated. The desperate need for approval vanished, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. I stood up. I didn't rush. I didn't knock over my chair. I stood up with the grace of a woman who owns the ground she stands on. I looked at Cynthia, who was frantically rubbing her bag with a silk handkerchief. I looked at Winston, who was glaring at me with contempt. I looked at Garrett and Kylie, who were watching us like we were reality TV entertainment. You're right, Mom, I said. My voice was deadly calm. It was so steady it surprised even me. Cynthia looked up, paused by my tone. This environment isn't suitable for Daisy, I continued. I thought it was a family dinner. But I see now that I was mistaken. This is a room full of children pretending to be adults. And quite frankly, your behavior is beneath us. Beneath us? Winston laughed, a harsh, barking sound. You drive a car that belongs in a junkyard, Ophelia. Nothing is beneath you. Now sit down and stop being dramatic. You're making a scene. No, Dad, I said. I picked up Daisy. She wrapped her legs around my waist, burying her wet face in my neck. I'm not sitting down. And I'm not leaving because you told me to. I'm leaving because I refuse to let my daughter spend one more second in the presence of people who are so poor in spirit that they value a handbag over a human being. Cynthia gasped. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish. We're leaving, I said. Good. Cynthia shouted. Go. And don't expect us to pay for your meal. I looked at the table. The untouched pasta. The wet tablecloth. The napkin covering Daisy's drawing. Don't worry, I said, and a small, dangerous smile touched my lips. The bill is taken care of. I turned around and walked to the door. You'll regret this, Ophelia. Winston called after me. Don't come crawling back when you need rent money. I didn't look back. I pushed open the glass door and stepped out into the main dining room. The hush of the restaurant wrapped around us. The hostess looked at me with concern, seeing Daisy crying. Is everything all right, ma'am? She asked. I stopped. I adjusted Daisy in my arms. Everything is perfect, Sarah, I said. I just realized I was at the wrong table. Walking out of the restaurant felt like walking out of a prison. The cool night air hit my face, drying the tears that had started to form in my own eyes. Daisy was still sobbing against my shoulder, her little body shaking with hiccups. I'm sorry, Mommy, she mumbled into my neck. I spilled the water. I ruined the dinner. I stopped right there on the sidewalk, under the golden awning of the Gilded Fork. I pulled her back so I could look her in the eyes. Daisy, look at me. She blinked, her eyelashes wet and clumped together. You did not ruin anything, I told her, my voice fierce. You spilled water. Water dries. Accidents happen. Grandma yelled because she has a sickness in her heart that makes her mean. It has nothing to do with you. Do you understand? You are perfect. You are the best thing that ever happened to this family. Daisy sniffled. Really? Really. And do you know what? What? I'm hungry. Are you hungry? She nodded. I didn't eat my potatoes. Well, I said, hoisting her higher on my hip. I know a place that has the best chocolate chip pancakes in the world. And they don't care if you spill water. In fact, if you spill water, they just give you a straw to drink it off the table. Daisy giggled. A wet, watery giggle, but it was real. We walked to the valet stand. Kevin, the young valet, saw us coming. He looked at my face, then at Daisy's puffy eyes. He didn't say a word. He just sprinted to get my car. When he pulled the Toyota up, he opened the door for us. Have a better night, Mrs. Peterson, he said quietly. Thank you, Kevin, I said. I really mean that. I buckled Daisy in. I got into the driver's seat. I didn't drive away immediately. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. I looked at the restaurant one last time. I could see the glow of the Onyx room window. My family was still in there. Probably laughing about how they had chased us off. Probably ordering dessert. They thought they had won. They thought they had put the black sheep back in her pen. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. My hands weren't shaking anymore. They were steady. I unlocked the screen and scrolled down to a contact I had saved as Mr. Rossi, manager. I typed a text message. Mr. Rossi. This is Ophelia Peterson. I need you to execute Protocol 9 immediately. I paused. Protocol 9 was a code we had established jokingly in our first meeting, for nuclear option situations involving unruly guests. We never thought we'd use it. I typed again. The party in the Onyx room. The Petersons. They are creating a hostile environment for other guests. I want their check cleared. I want them escorted out. And I want their names added to the permanent exclusion list for the Gilded Fork and all affiliated properties. Reason: harassment of ownership. I stared at the send button. If I pressed this, there was no going back. This wasn't just a fight. This was war. This was cutting the cord. I looked in the rearview mirror. Daisy was wiping her eyes, looking out the window at the city lights. For her, I whispered. I pressed send. Then I put the car in drive and pulled away, leaving my family to face the bill, in more ways than one. Wow, things are heating up. Ophelia finally snapped, and honestly, can you blame her? I would have lost it the moment they insulted that drawing. Before we find out how the family reacts to getting kicked out, please take a second to hit that like button if you're rooting for Ophelia. And make sure to subscribe. Also, I'm curious, where are you listening from today? Leave a comment with the name of your city. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Alright, let's see what happens when the manager gets that text message. 20 minutes later, the atmosphere couldn't have been more different. We were sitting in a booth at Patty's Pancake House, a 24-hour diner with fluorescent lights that buzzed and laminated menus sticky with syrup. Daisy was happily devouring a plate of chocolate chip pancakes with extra whipped cream. Her tears had dried, leaving only slightly red puffy eyes as evidence of the trauma. She swung her legs under the table, humming a little tune. I sat opposite her, nursing a black coffee. I hadn't eaten a thing, and my stomach was twisted in knots, but watching her eat brought my heart rate down. "Mommy?" Daisy said around a mouthful of pancake. "Yes, sweetie?" "Why was Grandma so mad? Did I make the bag dirty forever?" I put my coffee cup down slowly. This was the conversation I had been dreading. How do you explain narcissism to a 5-year-old? How do you explain that some people love objects more than family? "No, baby," I said gently. "The bag wasn't dirty. Water dries." Grandma was mad because she cares about the wrong things sometimes. She thinks looking perfect is the most important thing in the world. Daisy frowned, thinking about this. "But you said being kind is the most important thing." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "That's because it is. And that's why we left. Because if someone can't be kind to you, they don't deserve to be around you. Not even if they are family." Daisy nodded, seeming to accept this logic. Then she asked the question that shattered me. "Does that mean we can't go to dinner with them anymore?" I looked at her innocent face. I thought about the years of snide comments I had endured. I thought about the way my father looked through me. I thought about my mother screaming, "Get that brat out of here." I realized then that I hadn't just been protecting the peace all these years. I had been enabling their abuse. I had been serving my daughter up to them on a silver platter, hoping they would finally take a bite of love, but they only knew how to chew us up. "No, Daisy," I said, my voice firm. "We won't be going to dinner with them anymore. Not for a very long time." "Is that okay?" she asked. "It's more than okay," I said. "It's necessary." My phone buzzed on the table. It was a call from Mr. Rossi. I took a deep breath. "Daisy, keep eating your pancakes. Mommy has to take a work call." I slid out of the booth and walked toward the entrance of the diner, where it was quieter. I pressed answer. "Mr. Rossi," I said. "Mrs. Peterson," his voice came through, crisp and professional, but laced with a hint of tension. "I received your text. I just wanted to verbally confirm the instruction before we proceed. You are invoking Protocol 9 on the party at Table 4 in the Onyx Room?" I looked out at the parking lot. I saw my reflection in the glass door, a woman in a simple black dress, tired but standing tall. "Yes," I said. "The guests are Winston and Cynthia Peterson, along with Garrett Peterson and his wife. I want the check cleared, comp the meal, I don't want their money. I want them removed from the premises immediately. And I want them banned from the Gilded Fork and any other establishment under my holding company." "Understood," Mr. Rossi said. "And the reason for the ban?" I closed my eyes. "Conduct detrimental to the atmosphere. Harassment of ownership. And cruelty to a child." "Very well, Mrs. Peterson. I will handle it personally. Consider it done." "Thank you, Marco." I hung up. My hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from adrenaline. It was the feeling of finally, after 30 years, hitting back. I walked back to the booth, but my mind was back at the Gilded Fork. I knew exactly how Marco Rossi operated. He was a man of immense dignity who tolerated zero nonsense. I could picture the scene unfolding. At the restaurant, my family would be halfway through their steaks. They would be laughing, probably making jokes about how I had stormed out. "Ophelia is so dramatic," my mother would say. "She always plays the victim," Garrett would add. Then, the heavy glass door of the Onyx room would open. Marco wouldn't send a waiter. He would go himself, flanked by the two large security personnel who usually stood by the front door. He would walk up to the table, not smiling. He would interrupt my father mid-sentence. "Excuse me, Mr. Peterson," he would say. My father would look up, annoyed. "We didn't ask for the check yet." "The meal is on the house tonight," Marco would reply. "However, I must ask you to leave immediately." I could imagine the color draining from my father's face. The indignation rising in my mother's throat. "What?" Cynthia would screech. "Do you know who we are? We are VIPs. We have received complaints regarding your behavior," Marco would say smoothly. "This establishment maintains a standard of conduct that you have violated. You are no longer welcome here. Please collect your belongings and exit, or I will have security assist you." The humiliation. That was the key. My parents didn't care about money. They cared about face. Being kicked out of the most exclusive restaurant in the city, in front of the city's elite, was a fate worse than death for them. Back in the diner, Daisy finished her last bite of pancake. "All done," she announced, wiping chocolate off her chin. "Good job, baby," I smiled, pushing the imaginary scene out of my head. "Ready to go home and watch a movie?" "Yes. Can we watch the one with the Magic Sisters?" "Of course." We drove home in peace. The city lights blurred past us. For the first time in my life, I wasn't wondering what my parents thought of me. I wasn't replaying their criticisms in my head. I was just Ophelia. And I was enough. I put Daisy to bed, reading her 2 extra stories. She fell asleep clutching her teddy bear, the trauma of the evening apparently washed away by sugar and cartoons. Kids are resilient like that. I went into my small living room and sat on the couch. I poured myself a glass of cheap wine, not because I couldn't afford better, but because I liked the taste of it. It tasted like rebellion. I checked my phone. It was 9:30. Mr. Rossi had sent a text. "Task completed. The party has been removed. There was a disturbance in the lobby, but they are gone. Their profiles have been flagged in the system. Have a good evening, Mrs. Peterson." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. It was done. I set my phone to Do Not Disturb, placed it on the coffee table, and turned on the TV. I didn't want to hear the fallout tonight. Tonight was for peace. Tomorrow would be for war. I woke up at 7 o'clock the next morning to the sound of birds chirping outside my window. For a split second, I forgot what had happened. I stretched, feeling rested for the first time in weeks. Then, I looked at my phone. The screen was lit up with notifications. It was like a digital crime scene. 47 missed calls. 23 text messages. 12 voicemails. I sat up, pulling the blanket around me. I felt a strange sense of detachment as I unlocked the screen. The barrage had started at 9:45 last night, presumably right after they found themselves standing on the sidewalk, and had continued until 2 in the morning. I opened the text thread. From Cynthia, 9:45 p.m. Pick up the phone. From Cynthia, 9:47 p.m. What did you do? From Winston, 9:50 p.m. The manager said you complained. You filed a complaint against your own parents? Are you insane? From Garrett, 10 p.m. Nice move, Ophelia. Dad is losing his mind. You embarrassed us in front of the McAllisters. They were eating at the table near the door. They saw everything. From Cynthia, 10:15 p.m. they banned us. They actually banned us. I have never been so humiliated in my life. You ungrateful, spiteful little witch. From Kylie, 10:30 p.m. You're just jealous because we have a life and you don't. You ruin everything you touch. I hope you're happy. I scrolled through them, reading the venom. It was amazing, really. Not a single text asking why I was upset. Not a single text asking if Daisy was okay. Just pure, unadulterated rage that I had dared to tarnish their reputation. Then came the voicemails. I played one from my father. Ophelia, his voice boomed through the speaker, sounding slurred, like he had had too much scotch. You have crossed a line. I don't know what lies you told that manager, but you are going to fix this. You are going to call them tomorrow morning, apologize, and tell them it was a misunderstanding. Do you hear me? If you don't fix this, don't bother coming to Christmas. Don't bother calling for money. You are cut off. I laughed out loud in my empty bedroom. Cut off? I hadn't taken a dime from them in 3 years. They were cutting off a phantom limb. I deleted the voicemail. I didn't respond to any of the texts. Instead, I went into my settings. I blocked Garrett. I blocked Kylie. I blocked Brittany. I didn't need their noise. But I hesitated over my parents' numbers. My lawyer's instinct, or maybe just common sense, kicked in. If things got ugly, if they tried to harass me or Daisy, I would need evidence. I left Winston and Cynthia unblocked, but I kept the notifications silenced. I got out of bed and made coffee. As the aroma filled the kitchen, Daisy padded out in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. Morning, Mommy, she yawned. Morning, sunshine, I said, kissing the top of her head. Want some toast? Yes, please. As I buttered her toast, my phone buzzed again. It was another text from Cynthia. Don't ignore me. I'm coming over. I stared at the screen. Coming over? She hadn't visited my apartment in 2 years because she said the stairs were bad for her knees. I typed a reply, my fingers flying across the screen. Do not come here. Daisy is getting ready for school. If you want to talk, you can apologize to her first. Otherwise, stay away. The 3 dots appeared instantly. She was typing. Then she stopped. Then she typed again. We'll see about that. I put the phone down. A cold chill went down my spine. They weren't going to let this go. Narcissists never do. They view boundaries as a challenge, not a limit. I looked at Daisy, eating her toast happily, oblivious to the war that was brewing. I'm going to protect you, I whispered to myself. No matter what it costs. 2 days passed in relative silence. The text stopped, which I knew was a bad sign. It meant they were plotting. On Saturday morning, I took Daisy to Riverside Park. It was our sanctuary. There was a small playground near the duck pond that Daisy loved. She ran off to the swings, her laughter ringing out in the crisp autumn air. I sat on a bench, sipping a latte, watching her. For a moment, I allowed myself to relax. Ophelia. The voice was like ice water down my back. I turned around. Cynthia was standing there. She wasn't wearing her usual power suit. She was wearing a trench coat and oversized sunglasses, looking like a celebrity trying to avoid the paparazzi. How did you find us? I asked, standing up instinctively to block her view of Daisy. Cynthia smirked, pulling down her sunglasses. You never turned off your location sharing on the Find My Family app, dear. You always were careless with details. I cursed internally. I grabbed my phone and swiped the setting off immediately. What do you want, Mom? I want to know what you said to them, she hissed, stepping closer. Her voice was low, but trembling with fury. Your father called the restaurant 5 times. They won't even put him through to the manager. They said the decision is final. Because it is, I said calmly. We have a standing reservation for Thanksgiving. Cynthia's voice rose, cracking. We have entertained clients there for 3 years. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? I had to tell the McAllisters we're trying a new trendy spot next week because I can't show my face at the Gilded Fork. That sounds like a personal problem, I said. How could you? She demanded, tears welling up in her eyes. Crocodile tears. I recognized them instantly. You are my daughter. You are supposed to be loyal. Over one spilled glass of water, you destroy our reputation? It wasn't about the water, Mom, I said, keeping my voice steady. It was about you calling my daughter, your granddaughter, a brat. It was about you caring more about a handbag than her feelings. She's a child. Cynthia waved her hand dismissively. She doesn't remember. But I remember, Ophelia. I remember that you stabbed us in the back. After everything we did for you. We raised you. We supported you when your husband dumped you. Supported me? I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. You ridiculed me. You mocked me. You treated me like a failure because I didn't have a rich husband anymore. Because you are a failure. Cynthia snapped, the mask slipping completely. Look at you. You're 31, wearing cheap clothes, driving a junk car, raising a child on table scraps. And you have the audacity to judge us? We are the only reason you have any status in this town. I looked at her. Really looked at her. I saw the fear behind the anger. She was terrified of being irrelevant. I'm done, Mom, I said. I turned away. Leave us alone. I'm not done. She grabbed my arm. Her nails dug into my sweater. You are going to fix this. You are going to call them right now, and I pulled my arm away violently. Don't touch me, I warned. My voice was low and dangerous. If you touch me again, if you come near Daisy again, I will call the police and file a restraining order. Do not test me. Cynthia recoiled as if I had slapped her. She looked around. A few other parents at the playground were watching us. The shame of being seen in a public confrontation was too much for her. You'll be hearing from your father, she spat, adjusting her coat. And he won't be as nice as I am. She turned and marched away, her heels clicking on the pavement. I stood there, my heart pounding against my ribs. I watched her get into her car and drive off. I looked over at the swings. Daisy was still playing, oblivious. She was pushing herself higher and higher, reaching for the sky. I took a deep breath. The sadness was gone. I was just ready. Bring it on, Dad, I whispered to the wind. Let's see what you've got. The letter arrived on Tuesday via courier. It required a signature. I signed for the thick, creamy envelope with the embossed logo of Peterson and Associates. My father didn't do things by half measures. I took it into the kitchen and opened it. It was a formal demand letter. And it was a masterpiece of legal aggression. To Ms. Ophelia Peterson, we represent Mr. Winston Peterson and Mrs. Cynthia Peterson in the matter regarding the incident at the Gilded Fork on October 14th. Our clients allege that your actions on said date constituted a malicious interference with their business relations and personal reputation. Furthermore, it is our belief that the actions taken by the management of the Gilded Fork constitute discrimination based on age and familial status. We hereby demand that you, 1. Immediately retract any false complaints lodged with the management of the Gilded Fork. 2. Issue a formal, written apology to Mr. and Mrs. Peterson. 3. Facilitate the reinstatement of their membership and reservation status at said establishment. Failure to comply within 48 hours will result in legal action, including but not limited to a civil suit for defamation of character and damages for emotional distress. Sincerely, Winston Peterson, ESQ. I read it twice. Then I started laughing. He was suing me. My own father was threatening to sue me for emotional distress because he couldn't eat his favorite steak. But the best part, the absolutely delicious irony, was the second paragraph. He was threatening to sue the restaurant for discrimination. He was threatening to sue the owner. He was threatening to sue me, to force me to let him into my building. He had no idea. If he filed this lawsuit, it would become a matter of public record. His team would have to do discovery. They would have to subpoena the ownership records of the Gilded Fork to name the correct defendant. And when they pulled those records, oh, it was going to be glorious. I picked up my phone. I didn't call my dad. I called my own lawyer, Catherine. Catherine was a shark who made my father look like a goldfish. She was one of the few people who knew the full extent of my wealth. Catherine, it's Ophelia. Ophelia, Catherine answered. Let me guess. Daddy sent a letter? He did, I said. He's threatening defamation and discrimination. He wants to sue the restaurant. Catherine chuckled. That's adorable. Do you want me to send a response? I can crush this in 5 minutes. I can send him a cease and desist that will make his head spin. I paused. I looked at the letter again. I looked at the pompous signature. I thought about Daisy's tear-stained face. No, I said slowly. No? No, I repeated. I don't want to stop him. I want him to do it. Catherine was silent for a moment. You want him to sue you? Ophelia, that's going to be expensive for him. Exactly, I said. Let him file. Let him pay the filing fees. Let him bill his hours. Let him send his paralegals to the Hall of Records to find out who owns the Gilded Fork. I want him to find out the hard way, Catherine. I don't want to tell him. I want him to see it on a piece of government paper. I want him to realize that the daughter he called a failure is the one holding the keys to the only door he wants to open. Catherine laughed. A low, appreciative sound. You are dangerous, Ophelia. I like it. Okay. We'll sit tight. We'll let the 48-hour deadline pass. Let him pull the trigger. Thank you, Catherine. I hung up. I placed the letter on the counter. 48 hours. Tick-tock, Dad. The waiting game was excruciating, but also strangely empowering. Wednesday passed. Thursday passed. I went about my life. I took Daisy to school. I worked on a few graphic design projects for my long-term clients. I went grocery shopping. But underneath the mundane routine, I felt like a general waiting on a hill, watching the enemy march into a valley rigged with explosives. On Friday morning, the deadline expired. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, my phone pinged. It was Catherine. He did it. He filed the suit electronically an hour ago. Winston Peterson vs. The Gilded Fork Management and Ophelia Peterson. I sat down on my sofa. He actually did it. He actually sued his own daughter. What now? I texted back. Now, Catherine replied, his team starts the discovery process. They have to identify the corporate entity behind the restaurant to serve the papers correctly. It usually takes a junior associate about 24 hours to pull the LLC structure. So we wait? We wait. Enjoy your weekend, Ophelia. By Monday, he's going to know. I put the phone down. I looked around my apartment. It was modest. The furniture was from IKEA. The rug was from Target. My parents saw this and saw poverty. They didn't understand that I chose this. I chose simplicity because I wanted a life that was real. I wanted friends who liked me for me, not for my bank account. But my parents, they worshipped the golden calf. They worshipped the facade. And on Monday, the facade was going to come crashing down. I felt a pang of sadness. Not regret, but sadness. Because I knew that once they knew the truth, the dynamic would shift forever. They wouldn't hate me anymore. They would try to use me. And that would be even worse. But I had to do it. I had to show them that I wasn't the weak, helpless little girl they thought they could bully. I stood up and went to the window. I looked out at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, in a glass office building, my father was probably popping champagne, thinking he had intimidated me into submission. He thought he was the hunter. He had no idea he was the prey. Oh my goodness, the suspense is killing me. Winston actually sued her. He has no idea he just stepped into a massive trap. I cannot wait to see his face when he reads the property deed. Before we get to the big reveal in the next part, please hit that like button if you're enjoying Ophelia's master plan. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the finale. Also, let me know in the comments, if you were Ophelia, would you let them find out the hard way, or would you have told them sooner? Let's get back to the story. Monday morning arrived with a gray, overcast sky. It was the kind of weather that felt heavy, like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm. I was sitting in my living room, my laptop open, pretending to work. In reality, I was staring at my phone, waiting. Catherine had told me that Winston's legal team usually did their filings and research first thing in the morning. At 10:30, my phone rang. It wasn't Catherine. It was my father. I stared at the screen. The name Dad flashed innocently, but I knew the man on the other end was currently undergoing a seismic shift in his reality. I didn't answer. I let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, it rang again. And again. I waited until the fourth call. I wanted him to sweat. I wanted him to sit in that expensive leather chair of his, staring at the document in front of him, realizing that his entire worldview was crumbling. Finally, I picked up. "Hello?" I said, my voice cool and detached. "Ophelia." His voice was unrecognizable. The booming, confident baritone of Winston Peterson, ESQ, was gone. In its place was a thin, raspy whisper. It sounded like a man who had just seen a ghost. "Dad," I said. "I'm busy. I assume you're calling about the lawsuit?" "My lawyer advised me not to speak to you directly." "The lawsuit," he repeated, as if the word was foreign to him. "Yes. The defamation suit. I received your letter. I'm prepared to go to court, Dad. I'm looking forward to it, actually." There was a long silence on the line. I could hear his breathing. It was ragged. "Drop the act, Ophelia," he said, but there was no fire in it. Just shock. "What act?" "I have the deed," he whispered. "I have the corporate filings." "Oh?" I said. "And what do they say?" "They say," he paused, swallowing hard. "They say that the Gilded Fork is leased from a holding company called OD Holdings LLC. "Correct." "And they say that the sole signatory and managing member of OD Holdings is you." I didn't say anything. I just let the silence stretch out, heavy and suffocating. "Is it true?" he asked. His voice cracked. "Do you own the building?" "Yes," I said. "How?" The word exploded out of him. "How is this possible? You drive a Toyota. You live in that apartment. You beg for scraps." "I never begged for anything, Dad," I cut him off sharply. "You assumed I was begging. You assumed I was poor because it made you feel superior. And as for how, let's just say Sebastian's family paid a very high price for my silence." He gasped. "The divorce? That was 3 years ago." $30 million, Dad," I said. I said the number clearly, enunciating every syllable. "I walked away with $30 million. And I invested it. I didn't buy Porsches. I didn't buy handbags. I bought property. Including the building you are currently sitting in." "What?" "Check your own lease, Dad." "Who owns the building your firm is in?" "Skyline Ventures, right?" "Yes." "Look at the parent company of Skyline Ventures." I could hear the rustling of papers. I could hear him typing frantically on his keyboard. Seconds ticked by. Then, a gasp. No, he breathed. Yes, I said. I own your office building too. I own the restaurant you eat at. I own the roof over your head from 9 to 5 every day. Ophelia. So, I continued, my voice hardening. You want to sue the owner of the Gilded Fork for discrimination? Go ahead. You'll be suing me. You want to sue for damages? I have better lawyers than you, Dad. I have the kind of lawyers that eat firms like yours for breakfast. Please, he stammered. And let's not forget, I added, twisting the knife. Your lease is up for renewal next month. I was planning to sign it. But now? After you called my daughter a brat? After you threatened to drag me into court? I'm thinking I might want a different tenant. Maybe a dog grooming business. Something with more class. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. For a man who made his living arguing, Winston Peterson had run out of words. Finally, he spoke. But the arrogance was gone. He sounded old. Ophelia, please. Let's be reasonable. We are family. Family? I laughed. It was a harsh sound. Now we're family? 5 minutes ago, I was the disappointment. 5 minutes ago, I was the defendant. Now that you know I'm worth more than you, suddenly we're family? I didn't know, he pleaded. If I had known. If you had known, you would have treated me better? I asked. Do you realize how sick that sounds, Dad? You're admitting that your love is conditional. You only respect people with money. That's not true. It is true. I yelled, losing my cool for the first time. It is exactly true. You treated Daisy like garbage because you thought she was a poor child with no future. If you knew she was the heiress to a fortune, you would have treated her like a princess. That is disgusting, Dad. That is vile. I'm sorry, he whispered. You're not sorry you did it, I said. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry you picked a fight with someone bigger than you. I can fix this, he said, desperation creeping into his voice. I'll drop the lawsuit. Immediately. I'll tear it up. We can forget this ever happened. I'll tell your mother to apologize. We can have dinner. Anywhere you want. My treat. I closed my eyes. It was pathetic. It was exactly what I expected, and yet it still hurt. He was trying to negotiate. He was trying to cut a deal. I don't want your dinner, Dad, I said. And I don't want your apology. It's too late. Think about your mother, he said. She's devastated. She's embarrassed. Good, I said. She should be. Ophelia, don't do this. Don't let a business dispute destroy this family. You destroyed this family years ago, I said. You destroyed it every time you compared me to Garrett. Every time you ignored Daisy. Every time you made us feel small so you could feel big. I'm just finally walking away from the wreckage. Wait, he cried. What about the lease? You can't be serious about the office. We've been here for 10 years. Moving would cost us, it would cost us a fortune. We'd lose clients. That sounds like a business problem, Mr. Peterson, I said, using his professional title. I suggest you start looking for new space. I hear the suburbs are affordable. Goodbye, Dad. I hung up. I stared at the phone. My hand was shaking, but my heart felt lighter than air. I had done it. I had faced the monster under my bed, and I had turned on the lights, only to reveal that the monster was just a sad, small man afraid of the dark. I sat there for a long time, listening to the silence of my apartment. It didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt peaceful. The fallout was immediate and predictable. Within an hour, the news had spread to the rest of the family. The tone of the messages changed instantly. From Cynthia, 11:30 a.m. Ophelia, darling. Your father just told me the incredible news. Why didn't you tell us? We are so proud of you. A real estate mogul in the family. We must celebrate. From Garrett, 11:45 a.m. Hey sis. Long time no talk. Listen, I always knew you were the smart one. Crazy about the building, huh? By the way, I've got this investment opportunity I'd love to run by you. Ground floor stuff. Let's grab lunch? From Kylie, 12 p.m. OMG Ophelia. I'm so sorry about the other night. I was just stressed with the wedding planning. You know how mom gets. I'd love to take Daisy out for a girls' day. Does she like American Girl dolls? I read them all with a detached curiosity. It was like watching a nature documentary about scavengers circling a fresh kill. They weren't apologizing. They were auditioning. They were auditioning for a role in my new life, the life where I was the bank. At 4 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I checked the peephole. It was Cynthia. She was holding a massive basket wrapped in cellophane, filled with toys and candy. I didn't open the door. She knocked. Ophelia? It's Mommy. I brought presents for Daisy. I leaned against the door. Go away, Mom. Ophelia, please. Open the door. Let's talk about this. We're family. Daisy walked out of her room, holding her teddy bear. Who is it? It's Grandma, I said quietly. Is she still mad? Daisy asked, shrinking back. No, I said. She's not mad anymore. She wants to give you presents. Daisy's eyes lit up for a second. Presents? But then, she paused. She looked at the door, then at me. Is she only nice because she wants to come in? The wisdom of a 5-year-old. It floored me. Daisy had learned the lesson I had spent 30 years ignoring. Yes, baby, I said, kneeling down to hug her. That's exactly right. She's trying to buy her way back in. I don't want the presents, Daisy said firmly. I want her to go away. I smiled. I stood up and looked at the door. Did you hear that, Mom? I called out. Daisy doesn't want your bribes. Please leave. There was a silence on the other side. Then, the sound of muffled sobbing. You're cruel, Ophelia. Cynthia wailed. You're a cruel, heartless girl. Maybe, I said to the wood. But I learned from the best. Eventually, she left. I watched her from the window, lugging the giant basket back to her car. She looked ridiculous. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. I didn't renew the lease. Winston tried everything. He sent letters. He sent mutual friends to mediate. He even tried to sue me again to force a renewal, but Catherine crushed that motion in court before it even saw a judge. Ophelia Peterson Blackwood Holdings was within its rights to deny renewal. 3 months later, I drove past their old office building. I saw the movers carrying out the mahogany desks and the leather chairs. I saw the sign Peterson and Associates being taken down from the lobby wall. They had to move to a smaller office park in New Jersey. It was a 40-minute commute from their country club. It was a significant downgrade in prestige. Word got around town, as it always does. The rumor was that Winston had lost his prime location because of financial restructuring. He lost 3 major clients that month. His reputation took a hit he would never fully recover from. As for the family, I maintained absolute radio silence. I sold my apartment, not because I had to, but because they knew where I lived. I bought a beautiful house in a quiet, gated community 30 minutes away. It had a big backyard for Daisy, with a swing set and a garden. I changed my phone number. I changed my email. I kept in touch with exactly 0 people from my old life. Sometimes, late at night, I would wonder if I had gone too far. Was it vindictive to evict my own father? Was it cruel to cut off my mother from her grandchild? But then I would remember the look on Daisy's face at that dinner. I would remember the years of emotional abuse. I would remember that they only came knocking when they smelled money. And I would sleep like a baby. It has been 6 months since the dinner from hell. Tonight, Daisy and I went back to the Gilded Fork. We walked in, and the atmosphere was warm and welcoming. Sarah, the hostess, greeted Daisy by name. "Hello, Princess Daisy," Sarah said. "We have your favorite table ready." Daisy beamed. She was wearing a new dress, yellow this time, and she walked with her head held high. We sat in the main dining room, not the Onyx room. I preferred being among the people. Mr. Rossi came over to our table personally. "Good evening, Mrs. Peterson," he said, pouring sparkling water into Daisy's glass. "The chef has prepared the mac and cheese with the white truffle shavings, just for the young lady." "Thank you, Marco," I smiled. Daisy pulled out a new drawing. It was a picture of us, me and her, standing in front of a big house with a rainbow over it. "Look, Mommy," she said. "It's our happy house." "It's beautiful, baby," I said. As we ate, I looked around the restaurant. I saw families laughing. I saw couples holding hands. I realized that family isn't about whose blood runs in your veins. It's about who holds your hand when you're scared. It's about who defends you when the world is mean. I had built a new family. Just me and Daisy. And it was perfect. But I know people talk. My aunt sent a letter to my lawyer, claiming that my parents are depressed. She says my mom is too embarrassed to go to her social clubs. She says my dad is talking about early retirement because the firm isn't doing well. She called me a monster for using my wealth to destroy them instead of helping them. She said I should be the bigger person. I looked at Daisy, wiping cheese off her face, completely happy, completely safe, completely loved. I didn't feel like a monster. I felt like a mother. But I have to ask you. Am I the jerk? My family humiliated my 5-year-old daughter in public. They treated me like dirt for years because they thought I was poor. When I revealed I was the owner of the restaurant, and their landlord, I didn't just ban them, I evicted their business and cut them out of our lives completely. Some say I served justice. Others say I abused my power and should have just walked away without destroying their livelihood. Did I go too far? Or did they earn every single bit of this karma? Thank you so much for listening to Ophelia's story. That ending was intense. Personally, I think Winston got exactly what he deserved, but I want to know what you think. Was Ophelia right to evict her father's law firm, or was the ban from the restaurant enough? Let me know your verdict in the comments below. Are you Team Ophelia or Team Family? If you enjoyed this story of revenge and justice, please hit that like button, it really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We have a crazy one coming up tomorrow about a mother-in-law who wore a wedding dress to her son's wedding. You don't want to miss it. See you next time.